Greetings and salutations. On this episode, we speak with licensed social worker Shanee Smith about moving forward from trauma. It's one thing to come to terms with an offense, but moving forward in a new direction is an entirely different conversation. Get ready for some tips, tools, and truth on how to move forward right here on LifeClub. I'm Tashima Jones. Welcome to LifeClub. I genuinely believe personal development unlocks the door to the abundant and wonderful life we all already have. I also believe we must be intentional about seeking out that life in order to find and fulfill it. I am so grateful your journey of discovery has led you all the way here. Let's keep moving forward together. Once again, welcome to LifeClub with me, Tashima Jones. Welcome. You are tuned in to LifeClub with Tashima Jones and my homegirl Shanee on the board. Today we are speaking about moving forward from trauma. After we confront, accept, and forgive, the next step is actually moving forward. And if you have ever experienced any form of distress, you know how difficult it may be to move on. Today, we are super excited to speak with Shanee Smith. Shanee, LMSW, we're going to get into those, letters soon, is currently rooting herself in Brooklyn, New York, where she serves as a trauma-focused therapist in a citywide private group practice. Additionally, Shanee has been working with and alongside gender justice organizations and national movements to support in the design and piloting youth-centered survivor circles to serve as a place to heal from sexual violence, learn advocacy skills, and experience joy. As a licensed social worker, community-based healer, and teaching artist, Shanee brings over 8 years of experience working especially with those living at the intersections of Blackness and queerness. In her practice, Shanee integrates a handful of I had an issue when I was going over your bio with this word. Handful of modes such as CBT, motivational interviewing, art therapy, and restorative justice to support individuals and communities in reclaiming their own healing powers. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Miss Shanee Smith.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. I'm excited to have this conversation with you because I think it's really important.
Yes. Super excited to have you on. It took a minute, but I'm so happy that we are here.
Exactly. I'm happy we got a chance to connect. For sure.
So, of course. So we're going to jump right into the same 7, our rapid fire round of questions. Are you ready?
Sure, yes.
Okay. What is your favorite song?
Okay, so this is a reggae song. I'm Jamaican. So it's called Lioness on the Rise by Queen Ifrica.
Okay.
Gotta play that.
I know. What's your favorite color?
Pink. But not hot pink. Light pink.
Okay. What's your favorite food?
Oxtail definitely is one of my favorite foods.
Okay, you like food. I've learned that people who like oxtails, they like food.
Because you got to be dedicated to eat it.
Like they like real like hearty food.
Yes.
How do you?
It's a one meal, and then you got to save it for the next day as well.
Those leftovers be hitting the next day.
How do you stay healthy?
For me, health is primarily along my mental health. So as someone who's doing therapy, it's very important for me to be in therapy too. So anything regarding to mental health, also just like personal life stuff, just like establishing boundaries with the people in my life. Because I'm a therapist, people, want to vent a lot to me. Sometimes I have to be like, okay, I want to hold space for this, maybe not right now, but let's get back to this. So that's definitely a way that I stay healthy mentally.
And that's so good, the thing you said about boundaries. I don't think we speak about boundaries enough. I think that oftentimes people see boundaries as selfishness, but it's so important for us to create a safe space for ourselves, because if we're constantly giving, our cup will eventually run dry, and then we have nothing to give to anyone because we could barely, sustain ourselves. So that's really good. I'm going to keep that in my back pocket.
And if anything, we can talk more about that in a little bit too.
Definitely. What advice would you give to your younger self?
So I would definitely say to my younger self to welcome and invite all of the emotions that you are experiencing as they come up. So instead of running away from them, embrace them, sit with them, even if they feel unfamiliar, and then take what feels good and then feel okay with sitting with what doesn't and then releasing it. So just like allowing yourself to feel everything and even open up about what that might feel like or look like with other people, because you never know what they might be experiencing as well. You don't have to go through that alone.
That's good. That's good. If you could go anywhere in space and time, where would it be and why?
I think it would definitely be along the lines of the last question. I think I would go back in time to meet my younger self. Maybe not disclose who I am, like an older version of myself, but just to kind of like impart those pieces of wisdom onto my younger self, because I think a lot about my inner child, and I would love to be in conversation with her and kind of get a sense of like what's going on internally and assure her of, those like pieces that I learned later on in life. So I think that would be really helpful.
And that's beautiful. Oftentimes when people tend to go into these spaces of, therapy and counseling, it's usually because they want to kind of fulfill that need that maybe that inner child didn't necessarily have at the moment. I know the same is true for me. Like just being in this space and being able to speak with people in your position or write about certain things or just, encourage other people. It's as if I'm always giving back to my inner child. And it's not necessarily me trying to fill a void, but it's knowing the space that I was in those moments and in those younger years, that you just want to kind of impart that into anyone who may be experiencing the same thing. So that's really beautiful.
Exactly.
That's good. And last but not least, what's your definition of life?
Okay, this is a really good question. I think life is a continuous journey of trying to step into your own truth and like get a sense of what your own authenticity looks like. So that could take an entire lifetime. That's definitely a continuous process, and it looks differently depending on where you are in life. So I think with that, life is a space of unlearning, of relearning, of stepping into that discomfort that we talked a little bit about earlier. Also, life is about ending and rebirth. So not necessarily like rebirth in a sense of like reincarnation, but rebirth like kind of shedding old layers of yourself throughout once you learn and grow. So definitely.
That is beautiful. Oh my goodness. Yes. I connect, because I always say we are whole. It's just delayering everything that kind of buried that wholeness and buried that identity, whether it's through experiences, society, culture, the things that we may have had, the things that we didn't have. It's like the whole you is in there. It's just a matter of shedding that, dead weight and all of the muck in the mirror of the world and really rediscovering that person. So, oh my goodness, I love it. Thank you so much. That wraps our rounds of the Same Seven. Like I said, the Same Seven is like a mini interview all in its own. It's just something I have a lot of fun with. So we're going to jump right in to our topic, which is moving forward. As mentioned earlier, there are times when we get it, we've forgiven, we've, found who we are, and we've let things go, and we've kind of recovered from the trauma that we may have experienced. But at times we find ourselves stuck on how to move forward. It's kind of like being in bondage for so long, and then you get your freedom, and then it's just like, okay, what do I do? So what does moving forward from a traumatic experience look like, and is it different for everyone?
Okay, so for this question, I think I'm going to answer the second part first, because I think it would be a good segue, and especially based on what we were talking about in regards to like shedding layers, kind of sitting with different parts and aspects of yourself through time. I think trauma is very nuanced and because of the nuance, it's very difficult to talk about. is very difficult to pinpoint because it's very personal and it manifests differently depending on your own set of experiences, depending on your identities, and how these identities and things interact with different people in the world. So when I'm thinking about trauma, I can think of two people experiencing the same traumatic event, but the way that they move forward through that healing process could look completely different. One person could hold a set of identities that looks very different than the other person and have a different upbringing, and those traits really impact how we even process or talk about our experiences with trauma. And so I think the process of moving forward for a lot of people, depending on what this trauma looks like I said earlier, it brings up a range of familiar and even unfamiliar emotions. So these emotions can be powerlessness, guilt, rage, shame, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So these feelings can come up whether you're working through trauma alone, whether you're working through trauma with your loved ones, people you care about, people you trust, and most especially with a therapist or clinician. And so I want to kind of focus on that a little bit more, because when people think about therapy, they think of, okay, this is going to be the thing that I'm definitely going to walk away from this first session feeling like I have a firmer grasp on what happened, or I'm moving to a place where I'm starting to feel better, which I beg to differ. I think when you're first starting with therapy and you're unpacking your trauma, a lot of the times it gets worse before it gets better. So for a lot of people, you're talking through things for the first time, maybe things that you might have bottled up for a long period of time. And when you first start to talk about it, outside of therapy, you're starting to notice these things that are coming up that are reminding you of this experience, because you're hyper aware and hypersensitive to it now. So it brings up more of an opportunity, unfortunately, for you to potentially be triggered by conversations or by things that come up. And so this experience of yes, you're working on it through therapy, but then you're also working these things out outside of therapy too. So my supervisor often says that therapy is not the spa, it's the gym. So you're working in collaboration with a person to achieve a goal, rather than this person is coming in and doing the work for you. And so, long story short, I think moving through trauma can feel like a very difficult process and very raw process in the very beginning, but you kind of need to go through those initial hurdles of okay, I have to feel all of the things, and then slowly but surely you kind of get to a place where you start to, the rawness can transition into a place of healing. And then maybe it's a cycle. Maybe you feel like those raw feelings come up again. And I think that's the interesting part about trauma, is that it can become a cycle where sometimes you're feeling really, really rooted and grounded in yourself, and other times you have to take a step back and kind of reassess. So long story long for that response.
I mean, I have so many questions based on just what you've shared. And I think one of the questions is a huge part of trauma attributed to us reliving it over in our mind and in our emotions? For example, an offense may have occurred, an event may have occurred one time, but then does the trauma, I guess, deepen or take root based on how we respond after it? Are we continuing or deepening the trauma based on our response to it?
So the answer to that question is, a lot of the time when we're thinking about this reliving process, or kind of this idea of feeling like we're maybe reliving, or we're trapped in the past, it's not necessarily feeling trapped in the past, but you're experiencing a trigger. So when you're triggered by something, it's often a person or a place or a situation that reminds you of that traumatic experience, and then it causes you to go into alarm mode. So a lot of the times when we're thinking about alarm mode, we're thinking of flight or fight or freeze response. And so your body thinks that it is in immediate danger because it's being reminded of this traumatic experience. So when your body thinks that it's in danger, you can feel it in different ways. Maybe that looks like you're pacing back and forth, or maybe you can't sleep, or maybe you're lashing out on other people, or you're just like really tense. So those are some ways that you can kind of be in tune with this idea of like, okay, maybe I am being triggered by this thing. And so the thing about a trigger is that you don't always know. A trigger is oftentimes something that comes up out of the blue. You don't know that it's coming. And so it really depends on what that traumatic experience was. Maybe this person experienced gun violence, and so now every time there's a thunderstorm or there's a loud noise around them, it kind of brings their body back to this place of shock. Or say you were in an abusive relationship in the past, and now every time you feel like someone is telling you what to do or being really assertive with you, you're tensing up because you're being reminded of this time in your life. Maybe that person isn't having a sense of control or power over you in the same way, but your brain is going to that, okay, now what do I do? Because I'm being reminded of this person or this incident or this place. So, yeah, to answer your question, I do think a lot of the time when people are processing around their trauma, or maybe they're not processing yet, but their body is very much still responding and reacting to it based on these trigger reactions and responses.
And that's freeing, for me even, because I oftentimes do think that, you just need to let it go. You're living in the past. You need to move forward. But when you recognize, I guess, the mental aspect of it and the psychological aspect of it, sometimes it's not you intentionally trying to stay in that space. It's more of, like you said, the triggers that are reminding you of that and bringing you back into that space. So that's really, really helpful, because I think sometimes we get into this mode of thinking it's our fault. Like, why can't I just let this go? Why can't I just stop thinking about him or thinking about the experience? Why can't I just get over it? And when you are equipped with the information, just how your body functions naturally, like you said, the fight or flight, it kind of helps you understand that it's not your fault. And I think that is part of why some people they tend to appear to be stuck in a certain thing that may have happened to them, because they almost feel like they're not allowing themselves to, I guess, be the survivor of that, versus, seeing themselves as the cause of it. So that's real. Thank you, girl. You done helped me.
Yeah, and the way that I like to think about triggers is that it's your body's way of protecting itself. And so I would shy away, like you were saying, from this idea of, it's my fault that I can't effectively move forward from this traumatic experience. Your body is literally wanting to find different ways and strategies and mechanisms to kind of shut it down before it continues, if it feels like this thing will happen again. And so there are people that I've worked with in therapy who've experienced sexual trauma or sexual violence. And for instance, say they're moving into a new intimate relationship with someone, and they're experiencing their body kind of like shut down every time they're moving into a new sexual or intimate experience. It can feel very frustrating, but then also thinking deeply about the fact that your body is shutting down because it wants to stop it before it even has the possibility of kind of re-entering that space of feeling like that boundary is being crossed, which we talked about before, like establishing boundaries and all of those things. And so really sitting with yourself and like recognizing, okay, what can help me to, or how can I be in conversation with this other person around this traumatic experience if I feel comfortable in doing so that we can kind of curtail all that the body might want to do in response to this possible re-traumatizing experience.
And that's so good. I think I feel like your physical body works in conjunction with your mental and emotional part of you. And instead of disconnecting the two, bringing the two together in order to reach a certain goal and move forward, like your body is working for you. It's not working against you. But I think when there's a disconnect, we don't really recognize that, and we try to search outside of ourselves for our healing. And it just brings me to what you said about helping people discover their healing powers. I love that. Speak a little bit more about just the human being itself and those healing powers that you mentioned.
Yeah, of course. So I want to think more about a part of the work that I'm doing right now with teens who have experienced sexual violence. And I think that this conversation comes up in different ways all the time. We're thinking about, all right, I'm entering a space where someone is, assisting me in recognizing what it means to even heal. And so a lot of the times when we're experiencing this sense of powerlessness, especially after something like sexual violence, we feel like we don't even have power in our own healing after that. Like, what does that even look like? Mm-hmm. And if I am in a space where I'm working with a therapist or I'm working with other people who are also healing simultaneously, it can feel like, okay, I am going to you for all of the tools. You are going to teach me. I'm going to learn from you. And I don't think that I can heal without this space, which is the exact opposite of the type of space that I'm, often facilitating with these young people. And so the encouraging them to unleash or find or tap into their own healing powers comes from this idea of when we're in our healing space, it's happening in a circle. And so that's to promote this sense of equity in the space. We're all sharing space. We're all sharing our knowledge. We're pushing this idea of, like, you are the expert of your own life and your experience, and I'm not teaching you how to heal. I am opening up the space for us to talk about what tools have worked for us, what hasn't worked for us. Maybe there are tools that you might not have been aware of, and we're talking through that with one another. And so for me, too, like, as someone who's facilitating this space, I'm not just facilitating the space for them, but I'm facilitating the space for myself as well, who's going through my own healing outside of this space. So it's thinking about if we're talking about our healing with a therapist or with other people in our life, it's not a matter of you're teaching me how to heal, but how can we engage in conversation with one another so that we're all healing as a community? What does community care look like? If I'm struggling, how can I, kind of take away this, like, stigma of even asking for help? Because that can be really hard for a lot of people, especially survivors, to even tap into this community of support and ask for help. And so I think even just being in dialogue in that way helps people to really recognize that, like, oh, I do have the tools within me already. And this space is to help me understand what those tools look like, as opposed to, okay, I'm going to learn from this person, and this person is going to be the person that helps me for life. The idea is that even after the space is complete, after however many months, that they still have those tools to continue outside of the space, outside of the group, and work on that for the rest of their lives.
That's a beautiful thing. I think for me, when I did experience some traumatic events in my life, part of my healing was sharing my story and helping others. And through me sharing that, it helped me. So I think just being in that group setting, being in that circle and sharing those things and seeing how your story can heal someone else gives you the confidence to say, it's in me. Like, it's almost like this evidence, this manifestation of the healing powers that's in you because you're seeing it heal someone else. So we, talked a little bit about how moving forward looks for different people. We spoke about, this whole idea of being trapped in the past versus things just being a trigger and reminding you of those events. I wanted to get into boundaries. That's one of the things that came up earlier, and some other practical steps in moving forward.
So, like you said, we definitely talked about boundaries, and that can look very differently depending on the person. And so what boundaries means is thinking about what are your hard yeses and your hard no's for yourself, first and foremost. So I know of just like multiple people, especially myself too, feeling like, have you ever thought about a moment in time where you thought you wanted to meet up with a particular person or spend time with someone, and then like the moment comes and you realize that you really just don't have the emotional capacity to actually go out and do the thing? Like, that could be an example of ways that you practice setting a boundary with yourself. Like, if you know internally that this thing doesn't feel good for you in that moment, like practicing saying no, first and foremost, with other people, with yourself, like recognizing when it feels good in your body and when it doesn't. And also practicing saying yes when you want to push yourself to kind of like, go outside of your comfort zone in a way that feels comfortable to a point where, okay, it feels a little bit uncomfortable, but not so much so where I feel like I'm completely doing a thing that like is a hard boundary for me. And so also thinking about another tip is thinking about like when to ask for help. I spoke about that a little bit ago. So when you are kind of going through your own thing, when you're kind of like not in a good emotional headspace, it could be really difficult to ask people around you for help. Maybe before getting into that headspace, mapping out what your community of care looks like. So, maybe you're having a difficult time getting out of bed because you experience depression. Maybe you have someone that you can reach out to that you can kind of just be in their company. Maybe they come over with some, like, your favorite snacks, and you just, like, make a point to watch movies on a Saturday. Like, just thinking about who are your community care partners, who are your accountability partners, like people that you're reaching out to, if you have capacity to make sure they're doing okay, and like also like people that you can, expect and rely on to kind of check in with you from time to time and make sure that you're doing okay. And then like on a more serious note, if you're really going through it and you feel like you might just not be in a good headspace, like thinking about what is my safety plan. So if you're working with a therapist, this is something that you and a therapist might do together. But say you're someone who experiences depression, has a history of doing things that can put yourself at risk, like thinking about what your safety plan is. Like, how do I know that I am being triggered? How do I know that this thing that I'm being triggered by might kind of like spiral into something else? Developing a safety plan of like, okay, who, like I was saying before, like who are the people that I can call if I'm really struggling? How do I know that I'm really struggling? And what are just the things that I want to do to ground myself in that moment? What are the things that I can remind myself that I already have the tools within myself to tap into to kind of bring myself from like 100 down to a number that feels more manageable for you? And yeah, like I was saying before, kind of like sitting with what those triggers might be. Like maybe it's not when you're in the triggering moment yourself, but just being aware of like, what do you tend to respond to in a particular way? What do you tend to react to in a particular way? And talking through that with other people in your life so that they know that, okay, she's bouncing her leg, that means she's kind of like going through her own internal process. And like, what are the questions that I can ask her to make sure that she's, doing okay? Like, what do you need right now? Do you need to take a walk? Do you need me to kind of like check in with you in 10 minutes? Like, do you need space? Kind of identifying for yourself. What are those things that might come up later on that would be helpful for the people around me and the people that I spend the most time with to know about me?
I totally appreciate your response. And I'm like, why are you so surprised? This is why she does what she does. So I'm just so grateful for the way that you explain that, not only on the multiple levels, but also as just like this holistic approach to the having a safety plan. We oftentimes we prepare for like hurricanes and all these other things, and we don't even like prepare for that storm that might be on the inside of us. So I'm just really, really grateful for the way that you explained those tips because we are literally the most important person to think about, to really be connected to. And of course, everybody else around us is just as important. But if we cannot help ourselves, we cannot help anybody else. So having safety plans for yourself and having, accountability partners or someone there that you can rely on to just be there for you. Like like I said, it's freedom, really freedom in this conversation. What you mentioned about as simple as saying, having your hard yeses and your hard nos, that has been a really big issue for me because I was like super codependent and I always wanted to please everyone and I always wanted to make sure everybody else around me was happy because that's where I got my happiness from. How do people break away from that and really enter into that space where they can create those boundaries, being that they may have depended so much on so many other people or things to really find their sense of self?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And so when I'm thinking of like codependency specifically, I think of, and this is not for everyone who experiences codependency, but some people feel like it feels a lot easier to be the person who helps everyone else around me because I don't want to sit with and acknowledge the things that I might have been internalizing and pushing to the side. It just feels a lot better and more fulfilling for me to kind of pour into everyone else. And I think for me, something that I like to tell people and encourage people to do is maybe little by little, because it can feel overwhelming to do this like from 0 to 100, but practicing sitting with yourself a little bit more. And again, like I was saying, maybe that doesn't mean an entire weekend alone or going out to a restaurant by yourself as like your first step, but even just like taking a little bit of time as soon as you wake up to not check your social media and to kind of like sit with yourself and have a better understanding of like what feelings come up for you to kind of just like be in your own solitude. Maybe that looks like, writing down some of what those feelings mean, or even writing down some affirmations for yourself or some mantras that you want to repeat to yourself when you're feeling like, I want to reach out to this person right now because I can't stand to be alone. Or I kind of just want to like avoid, like thinking about, okay, what might be the root of this avoidance? Is it because I'm dealing with a loss that, I don't really want to acknowledge right now? Am I experiencing, it's just a manifestation of like some of my deeper insecurities that I don't often talk about or talk through? But just like the little by little, like 10 minutes at the start of your day and at the end of your day, and then like working toward, again, you can even incorporate the accountability partner piece. I think that really helps me. Sometimes my supervisor is like, what did you do this weekend? And like checking in with me and like reminding me like, hey, you said that you were gonna rest. It seems like you had a really packed like weekend of like socializing and like spending time with other people, which is something that brings joy to your life. But how can you incorporate joy in different ways? I think is really helpful.
That's good. That's good. This hour goes by way too fast. I wanted to take this time to for you to kind of share certain things that you're working on, whether it's events or books, anything of that nature, and how people can stay connected to you.
Great question. So right now, I am still working on social media. Social media is not something that I am thriving in this moment. So the way that people can reach out to me via email right now, so smith@sixthstreetwellness.com. Six is spelled out SIXTH, streetwellness.com. And some of the things that I have happening right now are in the works is I'm planning a co-facilitation series where I'm going to be facilitating spaces in Brooklyn for folks to talk through what it means to support folks who are survivors, what it means to kind of hold yourself accountable to some of those goals that we were talking about. So like, what does boundary setting look like for us? How do we kind of sit in our own truth? How do we acknowledge the moments where we've even caused harm in our relationships, and with other people in our lives. I think a lot of the times it's easier for people to think a lot about how we've been impacted by people, but I think a part of our healing is to think about how we've impacted other people in our lives and then move forward in that way. And I think that that can be a helpful way to think about our own boundaries in relationship to others and how to sit with other people's boundaries too. So those are some things I have coming up. This workshop series will be starting from now this spring and into the summer, again in Brooklyn. So if anyone has any questions about that, feel free to send me an email and we can chat about that too.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shanee. I totally appreciate your energy. It's just good vibes all in the studio. I appreciate you being a part of Life Club, and I am so grateful to just have had this conversation with you. I definitely want to stay connected. Once again, thank you so much for being our guest.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. So, Sunny, where can everybody find you?
You guys can find me everywhere under I Am Sunny Savage.
Awesome. And my name is Tashima Jones. You can find me at tashimajones.com. All of my social media and contact information can be found there. Until next time, remember your greatness. Talk soon. I am Tashima Jones, and you've been listening to Life Club. Thank you for tuning in.